going to begin with a poem called Kindness by Naomi Shihab Nye. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment, like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go. So you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to gaze at bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, "It is I you have been looking for," and then goes with you everywhere, like a shadow or a friend. Good morning. I know I'm not the person normally up here, so just briefly, if you missed it at the beginning of the service, I'm Joliene Gatlin. I'm a member here at Peace, and I'm on the Children, Youth, and Family team. I also have a Master's of Divinity from Pacific School of Religion in Berkeley and studied comparative religious studies at San Jose State. So I'm qualified to read the Bible and go, So here we are. Let's start out by saying that I don't think this woman was affected by an evil spirit. This is an old story, before our modern understanding of science and medicine. And at this moment in history, people would often push those who were ill or had chronic conditions out of society, quite literally, for the protection of the community. It's natural, and perhaps sometimes wise, to keep our distance from illness. Certainly none of us have forgotten the experience of COVID and how keeping our distance saved lives, despite being difficult and harmful in some other ways. Sometimes it's wise to keep our distance, but other times we are animals having animal responses, right? It's good to remember that sometimes these instincts don't serve us well. Sometimes they are coming from a place of ignorance and fear. Today we know that ailments and physical conditions are not indicative of moral failings or God's displeasure. We can see today how wrong it is to exclude someone because of an illness or something like that. But our modern society isn't exempt from this type of ignorance and fear. Let's remember the AIDS epidemic, so recent in our country's history, and how fear led people to ostracize and judge. Even today, we can see people out of ignorance and fear thinking they need to keep their children away from trans people or drag queens because they think it's somehow contagious and dangerous. Ignorance and fear. But let's get back to the bent-over woman. This woman has been suffering from her condition for 18 years. It's a long time. And we can tell by this, I think, that whatever condition she has, it's not fatal, right? And it doesn't seem to be contagious because she seems to be the only one affected by it. One of my Bible stories imagines that she's someone who's being physically abused, which I think is an interesting perspective. It could also add to the layers of her sense of judgment and personal failure. And perhaps, ultimately, given this historical moment, might add to the community's judgment of her. She's been hurting for nearly 2 decades, and it feels like nobody cares. It seems like people all around this woman are pretty fundamentally unkind to her. But not Jesus. We don't know what her illness was, but based on prevailing thought at the time, her community thinks she's got something bad going on. The powers that be are not happy with this woman, or she wouldn't be suffering for nearly 20 years, right? Good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. That idea makes us feel safe, right? She's got bad things going on, her problem. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps or something, right? Except we know better. Jesus knows better. This woman's been suffering for 20 years, but no one seems compelled to help her. No one extends kindness. Feel the future dissolve like salt in a weakened broth. Judgment can be crippling. I wonder how much that judgment, the way her peers treated her, had to do with this woman's condition. This woman spending all her time looking down, not making eye contact. How much of her is looking down because of her condition, and how much of it is her looking down to avoid judgmental glares from others in the room, to act like she doesn't hear the unkind words? So when I read stories like this, I have to ask myself, not just, how am I the crippled woman? How can I be like Jesus? But how am I being like the Pharisees? How am I behaving like one of these congregants who glared or looked away and tried to ignore this woman's pain? How do we make people feel welcome or unwelcome in a space? How might a rule be serving to divide, shame, or disclude? How do we enforce a cultural norm or the mores of a dominant group without realizing it, perhaps, in a way that is silently asking someone to mute their own cultural or personal expression? I think of dress codes that inherently discriminate against Black hair, or restroom rules that leave trans people nowhere to feel safe. I recall my mother's and aunt's stories of embarrassment because my grandmother would bobby pin tissues to their head on Sunday mornings for church. This was because my grandmother was trying to adhere to a dress code that suggested women's heads should be covered, but because they couldn't afford cute hats, they got tissue on their heads. So while this dress code was surely designed to communicate respect, it was mostly communicating income level and embarrassing those below a certain threshold. Now let me tell you, my mother and my aunts don't go to church anymore. Now, I don't mean to claim it's because 60 years ago someone put tissue on their heads. There are many reasons. But I know that most of us aren't excited to get dressed up and shamed for an hour every week. Most of us know how to feel bad about ourselves just fine in our own living rooms, right? So how do we honestly ask ourselves these questions about welcome and inclusion, knowing that their answers are sometimes rooted firmly in our blind spots? I might think I'm doing the right thing because I generally try to, but I might be part of that dominant group, looking at all the same places and missing what might be really obvious to someone else. Someone whose perspective is different, whose line of sight has them looking in different places. Like this woman. I give her a lot of credit, and I think that's why she's here in the Bible. Because remember that featuring women in stories like this is not common practice for the moment in time. Women's place was in the home, not in public spaces, but they're telling her story because she's brave and hopeful. Perhaps feeling like a drag queen walking past protesters outside of their storytime hour, or a woman walking past protesters to just get health care. She keeps showing up and taking up space, as difficult as it is, and even though others aren't recognizing her strength. Her faith that it will get better is still there. Her faith that she belongs in God's house is still there. As much as this community wants to abandon her and hope she'll just go away, she keeps showing up and participating. Her head is down, but she is still there. Because she understands that something that even the religious leaders in this passage are having trouble grasping about Sabbath. Abraham Joshua Hessel says that Sabbath is a day when we are to turn from the world of creation to the creation of the world. Moving past what things are to imagine what they could be. The world we know can exist is meant to exist if we can bring it into being. To move past this is the way we do things into this is how it could be. Some of the people in this story seem to be stuck on respectability politics, right? They're concerned about what is proper to the exclusion of what is kind, what is compassionate, what is just. They can't see the kingdom yet. They can only see what is. But Jesus knows we're here to love this world and to change it for the better. To learn how to be kind in the face of our own ignorance and fear. In the moments we know we may not fully understand the circumstances, or we may be afraid. But we know that God compels us to choose love, to choose healing and reconciliation, to choose kindness. Who are we in that room with the bent-over woman? Do we come here to reinforce our views and cultural norms or to challenge them? Do we come here to tell ourselves that we are blameless and chosen, or that we, like everyone, have broken places and a history of mistakes for which we need forgiveness? How might we be resistant to change and challenge? What person are we writing off as disruptive or a rule breaker when we should be listening to them for their prophetic take on the reality of how we're doing things? Because Sabbath is as much about making good trouble and doing the hard work of healing as it is about rest. Sometimes rest is healing, but sometimes it's not the healing we need. Sometimes we need to consider a different perspective. This woman shows up. She claims her space in a community that likely doesn't really want her there. Looking down, she sees differently than the dominant group in this place. She has a longing that most of us would have trouble grasping, a perspective that is in most of our blind spots. She knows what it is to look up, not because she does all the time, but because she doesn't. And because of that, she gets something that most of these other people don't get. Jesus sees that. He sees her. He sees her hope and commitment. He sees what she is there for is the most important thing. It's not what most people are there for, so they find it disruptive. It's not what they think should be happening on the Sabbath in a place of worship. It's unseemly. But Jesus is choosing love and kindness. Jesus knows that protecting these folks' level of comfort isn't the most important thing. Kindness is. He knows that making space for this woman and her needs, doing the hard work of healing, and honoring her perspective and experience are what these folks need to see. They need to learn to see things and value things a little more like her. She's not there making trouble, she's there making good trouble. She's there asking them to spread their circle a little wider, make a little more eye contact with strangers, and look up not toward the Pharisees and their rule book, but to look up at the faces around them, the ones they would perhaps normally look past, and to look for the face of God in them. Because that's where God speaks to us. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you into the day to gaze at bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, "It is I you have been looking for," and then goes with you everywhere, like a shadow or a friend. Amen.